Hi, I'm Paul Feiner. I'm the Greenburgh Town Supervisor, and there's two things that are guaranteed in life: death and taxes. And one of the people we're going to be interviewing today is Brandon Sall, who's the Westchester County surrogate. We're not going to talk about taxes, but we're going to be talking about death, right? So Brandon, could you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and about the surrogate's office?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm a lifelong resident of Westchester. I grew up in Mount Vernon, actually lived in Hartsdale briefly. Now I live in Rye, so I've been here my whole life. I was a practicing attorney for many years in the county, and in 2015 I was appointed surrogate judge of Westchester County by Governor Cuomo. And then I had a primary in June of 2015, actually September of 2015, and I won the general election in November of 2015, and I started my term on full term on January 1st, 2016.
What does a surrogate do?
The surrogate is the judge that handles the affairs of decedents that die with a will or without a will.
And what made you decide to become, to want to become a surrogate?
As part of my practice as a lawyer, I did work in the surrogates court, and I enjoyed it a lot. Judge Scarpino left the bench to become a private practitioner at the time, and there was an opening in the court, and I decided to run for it because I thought I could really be helpful, help families in their worst of times, and I really enjoyed the job. COVID was a bit difficult, but our court ran really well, and I have to give a lot of credit to our staff because we had an increased workload with the significant number of deaths that occurred in Westchester. But we assisted the county with emergency operations, and we did well. And so I'm enjoying the job. I get to help people every day, and I'm actually looking forward to running again because my term is up at the end of 2025.
And basically, how many employees do you have?
It's approximately 30 employees. So we have a chief clerk, a deputy chief clerk, we have various line clerks, and we have our own legal department with 6 attorneys. We have a lot of people working there. We're actually one of the largest surrogate courts in the state.
That is, that is great. If somebody has a problem with either a will or not a will, and they don't want to hire a lawyer, could they still represent themselves?
Well, often people are unrepresented. I still think that it's important for people to engage legal counsel if you can afford it. But in the event you can't afford it, we're going to have a help center in our court, which other surrogate courts in the state have. And Westchester just got one, and it's located in our clerk's office, basically, where unrepresented people could come in and get procedural advice on how to proceed in surrogates court.
So if somebody has basically, if they can't afford a lawyer and they basically there's somebody in their family who passed away, they could go to the help center and they'll help them with the forms, or will they? Well,
they won't help them fill out the forms, but they'll guide them in terms of the procedure. They're not going to be able to give legal advice,
right?
But they can point the individual in the right direction so that they could find their way with navigating in surrogates court.
I know, you have legal services, legal aid. Do they help people?
We don't have legal aid. We don't have that option. So that's why this help center is going to be so important for unrepresented people, where they could actually come to our court and speak to someone that's going to be able to point them in the right direction.
That is really great. Is there like a phone number or email or address?
Well, it's all going to be on our website. So there is going to be a phone number, and I'm sure an email. But if you look at our website, there's a way to contact us both with a phone number and an email.
That's great. And the website has a lot of information in terms of how to deal with these issues. What's the biggest problems that you see that that people come to your office have?
Well, I mean, we're dealing with people at their worst possible time. They've lost a loved one, and so here they're having real emotional. It's a very emotional time for these people, and then they have to, really figure out how to get the assets of their loved one transferred to them, and so we're dealing with people probably at the worst time of their lives.
And do most people, how soon after somebody dies, do most people go to your office?
Well, not right.
Surrogates, yeah.
It depends. If you have an ongoing business and you have no one there to write checks or do something, people come right away. But that doesn't happen as much as when people don't have a emergency. And so I would say people come within the first 6 months of someone's passing.
Right. In terms of wills, that's obviously an issue for people either having a will, or what happens if somebody can't find a will? Is that something that your office also deals with?
Yes, and sometimes people can't find a will, and they could bring, if they have a copy, depending on the circumstances, will admit a lost will into probate. So that's something. But I encourage everyone to get a will. I think it's important because then you dictate who gets your assets at the time of your death, as opposed to the state's intestacy laws deciding who gets your assets.
So, in terms of the state's, laws, basically, what if you don't have a will? What does the state basically?
It depends who survives you. I mean, if you have a spouse and 2 children, say the spouse gets the first $50,000, and then the spouse and the children split the rest of the estate. But what happens there is, and we see that all the time, that people that have assets don't have a will, and I'm sure that they would have wanted their spouse to control the money, all the money, as opposed to leaving their young children money outright, basically.
Right. So if somebody dies without a will, then basically you have to deal with what the state laws say.
Right. But in the example that I just gave, and we see it all the time, that people don't have a will that have significant assets, and the surviving spouse expects to receive all the money, but since there's no will, that doesn't happen. And as I said, the first $50,000 then would go to the surviving spouse, but the children would then split half the balance, and that's probably not what the decedent would have wanted, and it's certainly not what the surviving spouse would have wanted. So we see that all too often.
Right, and I guess will the help center also be an opportunity for people to ask questions even before they make decisions as to whether they're going to have a will or whatever?
Well, I think that
could be educational.
I think the help center is for people that have an issue in surrogate's court, and unless someone dies, there's really no issue yet in surrogate's court. So I think that our help center is going to be more for helping people that need to do something in our court.
I've referred a couple constituent concerns to your office, and your office has been very helpful. Do you get a lot of inquiries?
I get them from time to time, but I know that the clerks are constantly dealing with that. That people call up and ask questions. I don't get a lot of the day-to-day calls, but from time to time, like when you call me and you say you have a constituent that needs help, I put them in touch with one of our clerks. But I know that we get a significant amount of calls from constituents.
And I know that you've been very responsive, because every time I've emailed your office, I get a response, within days, which is, great. For somebody who's has a countywide position, it's very responsive.
Well, I had been a practicing lawyer for many years, and I always return calls, and I still do that to this day.
No, I think that's very.
Thank you.
I think it's very commendable, and that's one of the things I've always admired about you. In terms of estate proceedings, could you talk about the appointments to handle an estate proceeding?
I'm not sure what you mean by the appointments.
Who may be appointed? Like
who's it, like who? Okay, if you die with a will, you appoint someone in your will to be the executor or executrix of your estate, depending if it's male or female.
Right.
Well, I probably should just use the word executor, though. But and if you die without a will, your next of kin can petition to become the administrator of the estate.
In terms of that responsibility, is that something that people enjoy, want to do, or are there before somebody accepts it? Is there people may not realize how much time it's going to take.
Right. Sometimes people aren't capable of doing the work, and they become the administrator, and sometimes we have to remove them because they don't do what they're supposed to do. But why I think it's important to have a will is sometimes we see if somebody dies, without a will, and they have, say, 2 children, and both want to be the administrator. And if they get along, that's great. They'll both agree to do it together. But often they don't get along, and then there's a fight, and we have to figure out who the administrator is. So if there's 3 kids, and 2 want one person, then we usually go with the majority, and we pick that person.
So, when somebody's offered the responsibility of being the administrator of an estate before they accept it, what are some questions that they should ask, or commitments? Do most people get reimbursed for their service, the time that they spend, or?
Well, they would be entitled to commissions for doing the work, but we unfortunately don't have a class for people before they become an administrator or an executor. I guess when someone's named in a will as the executor, the person doing the will usually speaks to the person they're going to designate as the executor, and they tell that person, they're going to be appointing them, and what might be entailed. So, I think that's what generally happens.
I wonder if when you open up the health center, if that could be even having a class for people before they, just so they know what they're getting into.
Yeah,
Would that make any sense?
I mean, it certainly makes sense. I don't know, the staffing for our court, we go in ebbs and flows. Sometimes, we are fully complemented, and that was just about a year or 2 ago. We really had a full staff, and we lost some of our employees to other courts because they offered higher lines, which we didn't have to give them. So then it takes a bit of time to replace that person, train the new person. So I don't know if we have the staff to do that, but what we do is, and we just did one this week, we had a continuing legal education course in the surrogates court where we educated practitioners and paralegals on how to file things properly in our court to avoid the most common mistakes that are made in filing. So we did that, and we do that periodically. And we kind of stopped doing it during COVID, but this was the first time we had people actually in the courtroom, and we must have had over 70 people there.
Oh, wow. What are some of the common mistakes?
People don't fill out in terms of the forms that are there. They don't put none where none should go, so that the clerks don't know what the answer is really, and then they have to get back to the person. They sometimes use AKAs where they shouldn't.
Will the help center, like if I go to the help center and I have a form, would they take a look at the form before it's filed and say, oh, you did it right?
I don't think they're going to do that, but they're going to show you the form to use. They're going to maybe go over the instruction sheet, but the court staff there
Right.
is not going to actually
Tell you what to do.
Right.
Right. So
they can't give legal advice.
Right. In terms of somebody who's, say, a parent died and the asset is their home, their house. Do you have to file? Does somebody have to file a proceeding in the surrogates court? To have it turned over to.
Well, it depends whose name's on the deed. If the person's spouse is on the deed and their husband and wife, it transfers automatically
Right.
at death.
That's interesting. What happens if somebody died in a car accident? Does that ever come up?
Well, if somebody dies in a car accident, there's then usually, I don't know, you talk about a personal injury action.
Right.
So there'll be a personal injury action that's commenced in Supreme Court, and then eventually it'll come to the surrogates court to compromise, to determine who gets the proceeds of the wrongful death proceeding.
Right. One of the I sometimes get calls from residents who are looking for elder law attorneys, and what advice would you give residents who may not know who to hire? How could they do due diligence in terms of selecting an attorney that they think is going to be good? Like,
Well,
do you have any suggestions?
Well, first,
without giving names of people.
They should speak to their friends and neighbors to see if they've had a good experience with an elder law attorney. And if they don't have that ability, they should contact the Westchester County Bar Association, because they have a legal referral area where they will give you names of people that do, I'll say, elder law.
Right, because people always will call me and say, I want a lawyer who's not going to be that expensive. So, that's...
Well, I used to get those calls too, but the fact of the matter is that if you don't know, if you don't have a friend or a neighbor that's had good experience with someone, then my suggestion is to call the Westchester County Bar Association, and they can make a referral.
That is, that's great. In terms of getting a copy of a death certificate, is that?
Well, that goes. That's through the county, I believe, the health department. In the city of New York, I know it's the health department. I believe up here it is as well.
Right, and how does somebody obtain a guardian control over a child and a child's property?
Well, we do that, and so we have a guardianship clerk in our court, and if you fill out the proper paperwork, you file it, and then we'll issue that guardianship.
Boy, it's such a interesting field that you're in.
But the most significant thing that we do is 17A guardianships for intellectually disabled individuals. So often, if a parent has, say, an autistic child, they'll come to our court before the child turns 18 and seek guardianship over their child. So when they go to a doctor, they could say, "I'm the guardian of, I have guardianship over my child when the child emancipates or after the child turns 18."
Right. So in terms of filing an estate, you file that in, how do you know which court to go to?
Well, surrogates court is the only court that handles the affairs of decedents.
And the person would have to have died in Westchester to go to the surrogate.
Not died in Westchester, a resident of Westchester. You could die in the city, but if you're a resident of Westchester, that you file in Westchester Surrogates Court.
Right. And let's say somebody, a family member died in Florida, they would have to go to the Florida.
No. If the person died in Florida but was a Westchester resident, then the estate's probated in Westchester.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter where you die.
If they're a snowbird in Florida, but their primary residence is Westchester, then it would go to your court.
Yes. So each county has a surrogates court in the state of New York. There's usually just one surrogate, though, for each county, except New York County, which has two, and Kings County, otherwise known as Brooklyn. They have two. But other than that, the counties have one surrogate court judge.
Right. Are there any other points that I didn't, ask you that you'd like to focus on?
Well, I think that the guardianship component of the surrogates court is a very significant one, and because when you grant a guardianship, you're taking away someone's all their liberties. So we take that very seriously in our court, and we want to make sure that this person really deserves a guardianship. And now there's a new law coming into play called Article 82 of the Mental Hygiene Law, which is supported decision-making. So people that don't deserve a full-fledged guardianship, there may be an alternative, a less restrictive way to get the desired result for the intellectually disabled person.
Right. If somebody is, a student and they're looking at a career in law, and they want to go into, this field, what advice would you give them?
First of all, it's a very, I think, exciting field. I think things are always different. Every day is different. Something new happens every day. But you would want to maybe get an internship in the surrogates court. We have a program in the summer where people can get internships, both in the full courthouse, in the Supreme Court, where they can see things, different kinds of proceedings, and also in the surrogates court, we have interns from time to time. So that's a great way to see what we in fact do in surrogates court.
And are most of the jobs that employment opportunities, are most of them civil service jobs? So you have to take a civil service exam?
Not to be a court attorney,
Right.
You don't have to take a civil service exam, but the clerks have to take exams for promotions.
Right. So that's another opportunity. And are these jobs sort of hard to get? Are there ample job opportunities?
I think first there's postings on the court website, not the surrogates court website, but on the New York State court system's website, there's job postings all the time. And I think now it's actually easier to get a job in the court system because we're one of the few places where you have to actually show up at work every day. There's no virtual option for the people that work in surrogates court to work from home. So
that's sort of a negative, so it makes it easier to get a job?
I think there's less people that are looking to work in the court system because of that right now. And hopefully that'll change, in my opinion, because I think, we showed during COVID how well we could work remotely. And we kept up with the workload, and again, I give a lot of credit to my staff for that. But if I think we went to some kind of virtual option or remote option, I think that would be very helpful in getting people. But the answer to your question is, I think there's plenty of opportunities now for people to get jobs in the court system.
That's great. So that's reassuring for people who are out of work. So great. So thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome.
I found it very interesting. And you've been now surrogate since 2015?
Since June of 2015.
That is great. Well, I really appreciate your responsiveness to all the constituent complaints that I've referred to your office. And the fact
always happy to help.
That you always return phone calls. And, I think all elected officials should be like that, like you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. I'm Paul Feiner, Greenburgh Town Supervisor.